Good evening, and welcome back to another session of Paint It Forward. I'm Brett Henzig, the program director at Artists Working in Education, and this is another installment of our series focusing on artists and creatives from the Milwaukee area, thinking about early to mid-career artists of different backgrounds and looking at ways that we as an artistic community can really support one another, can help share the paths that we've taken through creativity, and hopefully inspire other people to find their own creative path, or at least learn about new people, new things, new happenings in our city. So we'd like to thank the Washington Park Media Center, which is a hub for media production, strategy, and training here in the Washington Park neighborhood. We are also thankful to the Milwaukee Arts Board for helping support this. And I'm very, very excited and happy to have Dena Nord with us today. So Dena, thank you.
Hi, Brett.
Hi. This first question that I always start off with, I think I struggle most with you in particular, knowing all of the hats that you wear. So I would like to have you introduce yourself by saying, how do you define you?
Yep, that's a tough one, right? My name is Dena Nord. I am a co-owner of a design agency in Milwaukee called Advent. I'm an artist and a muralist and a mom, defines me. And I think that during this whole conversation, I probably will be jumping back and forth between my role as a designer and a owner of a business, as well as a fine artist, as well as a former art teacher. Like, I'll be bouncing around.
Excellent. And that's another feature and another guiding light in terms of who we're hoping to talk to is people that have done a lot of different things. How can we, put it together as an artist? Milwaukee is a city that has a lot of talent, a lot of grit, a lot of work ethic. But sometimes as a creative person, you have to tap into a lot of different avenues to be viable, to make a living for yourself, to piece it together. And as a young person, whether that's a young person in high school, college even, or, a 4 or 5 year old, you might not realize how many nuanced things there are to do with creativity in the arts. So I'm really excited to be talking to you about the multifaceted approach that you've taken.
Yeah.
But it also brings me back thinking about youth and family. When you were a young person, when you were really, really little, what did you want to be when you grew up? Was it all those things that you just listed?
I think a lot of it was something creative. I really do. And I think I had people in my life that allowed that to happen. We were just talking for a moment before this even started about how some kids aren't even lucky enough to have that. Mm-hmm. I feel like I had a lot of different people around me that were like, yeah, keep going. And never really stopped me from being creative. I think it was either that or something with animals. I feel like the only other thing I remember is like maybe a veterinarian, but always something creative. And then I feel like design creeped in around middle school. I remember I didn't realize what it was at the time, but later in life, I'm realizing that in middle school, I started realizing like the power of like design and like putting like Abercrombie on a t-shirt. Like everybody was like drawn to that. And I was like, what does that even mean? Like branding, why do people care? I thought it was interesting. And I also got to do, I was into like logo design and all that stuff early. I didn't know what that was. And I remember getting to do the cover of like my 8th grade graduation ceremony book. And then I remember at graduation ceremony seeing everybody with a copy in their hand. And I was like blown away at that idea of like distribution and like I didn't realize it then, but that was really like a calling of design. Then I kept going in high school thinking I was going to be a fine artist. And my art teacher at the time was like, I think you should also pursue design.
May I ask why you think they advised of that?
Say that again?
Why do you think they advised you to pursue design along with fine art?
I think I was doing a lot of things that were in design, and I was always still focused on being a fine artist, but I think my teacher saw more like inherent design skills forming, and she was just a great teacher. Shout out Miss Gus. I'm supposed to call her Wendy. And I didn't even realize really what a graphic designer was, and she kind of like fueled, I feel like the ideas that I was having, I feel like she kind of fueled places for me to have access to being able to do stuff like that. She connected me to like the school newsletter, and I was doing like headers and covers for the school newsletter. And I feel like a good teacher, she just allowed me to kind of feel that venue out. So by the time I graduated, I enrolled in UWM as a design major with like a minor in painting.
And throughout that process, or like throughout that experience in college, did you feel yourself kind of still pulled and pushed between them? Like, was there a little bit of regret? Like, I wish I got more design, less fine art, or less fine art, more design?
Yeah, it's something I might still be dealing with. We don't know. It's tough. I think a lot of kids probably are dealing with that right now too, is like maybe they want to be a fine artist, but it's like, how do you make money? I think this is something that will come up in the talk a lot. So for me, I felt like I knew I wanted to be very independent, and I wanted to make my own money. I didn't want to like have to go back to my parents' house. And I was kind of thinking that I was more practical while going to college. And I do remember being in some of my early painting classes, and I don't know if it was the instructor or some of the people around me that were like, if you changed a couple things and you did X, Y, and Z, like your paintings would sell more. And that was also hard for me to kind of swallow, that if I wanted to be a fine artist and do more painting and drawing, maybe I had to conform to something that was like sellable. Mm-hmm. So I also didn't really like going down that path. I was like, I'd rather just keep fine art as my own path, and I don't have to conform. And I'm completely fine to do design, because I felt like the difference is art is for yourself and design is always going to be for someone else. The point is to cater to someone else's needs on what they need. And I was fine to make money on that. I was like, I can find a job doing that. I don't want to change how I want to do this.
That's really great to hear, because I know that's when I would work with young people, that was always something that was a touchy subject, like even advising them on, here's how you get more money for scholarships if you did this to your work. No, I don't want to compromise. And you're like,
and maybe
you're still growing, but
I feel like some kids are like so talented, so young, that it's like, just keep doing what you're doing.
Right.
And I don't think I was necessarily there. I feel like people were in a good way trying to teach me to pick out some style or do something. And I was like, I just kind of want to explore and do weird stuff. So, so it was tough, but I'm glad I landed where I did.
So I had this in my hopper to ask maybe at some point later, but I think you led me down a path where I'm going to get a little mischievous. I'm curious what your breaking point as a designer is. So knowing and hearing you say that design is all about the client, was there you don't have to name names, where a client just wanted something and you're like, no, that is too many fonts, that is too many colors, at what point do you step in and bring that authority to have them compromise?
I mean, this is live, so I shouldn't really be talking like this, Brett, because what if my clients are... No, it's definitely happened. I think earlier in my career, I was more working with people that would do stuff like that. And I feel like now we're celebrating 10 years this year for Advent. We've gotten a lot better at picking clients that value design. That's one of the things we learned early on. Not really. We learned it early on, but we still didn't actually like build it as a value of like, we're really not working with people unless they value design. I remember working with this older gentleman, I will say, earlier on in my career. And like in the design process, he kept reminding, my business partner is also a woman, and he kept reminding us to just make sure not to use pink though. And like every time I was like, wow. So we try to only work with clients now that we can tell in our onboarding process and from the start that they are hiring us for a reason and they're going to let us do our jobs. Earlier on in my career, yes, as soon as like I would end a Zoom call or walk out of a meeting, I would be like, I cannot believe they want us to use papyrus. Like, no, yeah, papyrus would be, to answer your question, would be a breaking point, or or just to. A lot of people are like, I like purple, so let's just use purple. If they have no like theory behind any of their design decisions, I'm trying to like put in all this like meaning behind what I do. And you can't just like pick things willy-nilly.
That's another question too that I think is more personal and less mischievous. But with your design work and your fine art, and you brought this up about your fine art being more for you, what elements of your design work do you feel like are more for you? Where can we see, looking at your design work, your personality and passion? Is that there? I feel like I see it, but I want to know if I'm
Do you
reading
feel like
into
you
it
see
too
it?
much.
That's great. I think we try as a company not to say we are like, there's a lot of agencies in town that you go to because you want like vintage style design, or you want, this certain look. We've always tried to say as a company and as designers that we're not going to cookie cutter ourselves into work. But I do think if you look at the last 10 years, most of the stuff we do and what most people are coming to us for is something like bright and energetic and feels like there's a lot of energy, and overall does seem like happy and uplifting. And I think that is definitely where I have an overlap, where I have to tell myself sometimes like, is this color palette maybe even too bright for the client and they need more muted? Do I just like the brighter tones? But I feel like that's kind of what they're coming to us for. I think the output most of the time for design is truly based on what the client needs, but the process, I think, is where maybe my personality comes in. I think that's where we've kind of like learned is out one of our biggest selling points is the reason you're coming to us. It's because we have a ton of fun why we do it. It's not serious. AWE's been one of my clients. I hope I make the meetings fun. It's not a serious process. We're going to try to feel like we're getting somewhere and we're actually making it really productive, but we're going to maybe talk for 10 minutes before about our kids.
Yeah, and I also wanted to say shout out to the Milwaukee Art Museum, because that's where I met you the first time when you were working there in the graphic design department. And we really appreciate in the education department those qualities that you brought to the work and to the process as well. So that does shine through.
Shout out Old Ma'am crew.
Yeah, just saw them the other day actually. And I saw my middle school art teacher and did not refer to them by their first name. Still, it still feels weird, right?
I know. It's hard. It's hard.
So thinking about your process in making, right? Are you behind the computer designing for 20 minutes and then putting on an apron and painting? Do you have a screen and a canvas next to you? Are they really separate moments for you? Do you kind of cleanse yourself before going from one to the other? Is it a shift in your mental state? Can you talk to me more about that, even if it's
That's
just
so funny.
walking us through that?
They used to be more separate. I used to have an actual physical office for the company, and I had an art studio. And just maybe a year and a half ago, we let go of the office. We weren't there that often. And I merged my studio and my office, and I love it. I really do actually have an easel on the wall behind me for Zoom meetings. And I think it's kind of entertaining for some of my clients because they're like, oh, you started a new painting back there. And I really do I have a big L-shaped desk. Half of it is like monitors, drawing paper, notes. And then the other half is, I was just looking at the other day and I was like, wow, if I could see this as a 14-year-old and know this is what I've got all my art supplies and I've just got such a good supply right now. And I'm just like, this is so nice. And I do feel like I don't cleanse myself necessarily. Sometimes I'll be distracted in a Zoom meeting because I'll be like, oh, look at, I should add this red right here. But it's nice. And that also lends itself to what I would aspire to do is I do want more of a merge at some point. I would love for my design company to be known for like really artistic branding and backgrounds and pattern making. more things like that. So sometimes there is a brand that I'm like, they should have a painted background, and I will break out some physical materials and then scan them in and, pitch them to a client. So sometimes they overlap, which is super good that now I'm in one space.
That's interesting. Is thinking about technology and how technology fuels a lot of design, just in terms of the efficiencies and like where design shows up in printed matter and web and things like that. As a person who is connected to the physical media, do you feel like those things are an advantage? Do you think that technology getting more analog or emulating, brushes and things like that, do you feel like that's a help for you, or do you still want to actually paint the background and then scan it?
I think you could tell. I think if someone wants something that is handmade, they're going to do it. If a client of mine is looking for something handmade, they're going to ask for it, or we're going to know to give that. AI is a touchy, weird subject right now. And I don't think it's going to take my job anytime soon. Anytime I've tried, I use it a lot for like writing copy or like, summarizing emails or things like that. But in terms of actually generation or generative stuff, I'm like, it's pretty good. It's okay, but it's not what an artist would actually do. It's not what an artist would make. So I think the tools are handy to maybe ideate. I've called it like a collaborator, some technology where it's like, if I really would love to sit down with a bunch of friends and throw out ideas, maybe I could just do that with some technology. But like brush strokes and stuff in Photoshop, again, it's like, I think I can kind of tell. It's getting better, but I think still there's going to be a real need for people that actually want to break out physical materials and have that be part of fine art, of course, and design.
Excellent. And I also wanted to ask you too about that. So I feel like there's that, the two-dimensional, there's the digital traditional, but then you've also worked with sound and syncing up your physical art making along with digital elements and music on YouTube. So
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Where's that going for you? And is that part of the fun that you were describing when you make?
Good memory, Brett, because I haven't been doing that for a few years, but that was where I feel like it merged the most, because I was really using my design skills on a computer and I guess what you're talking about is for multiple years, I worked on what was the Dena app. It was an app you could use in the store. And what I was doing was I was taking paintings and recording myself during the time-lapse process. And I was trying to make these videos that were to the beat of music. I do feel like I have a little bit of synesthesia. So I was trying to kind of harness in my mind's eye what I would see when I would listen to a song. And could I record that somehow in a time-lapse version of a painting and then sync it up to the music? And the way I'd present it to the world is in a gallery setting. I would have a show where I would tell everybody to download this app. Then they would come and see the work, scan it, and then get to hear and watch the experience of me painting it. So I feel like I was taking my fine art skills as well as my technical and design skills a lot to make the videos. And I felt like that was like me coming across as like my truest self of like, I do both. Not everybody would be able to do both. Here's both. It's weird. What do you think? And this was kind of, I feel like this was before AR or augmented reality got like super popular. This was maybe around like 2015 to 2018. I think if I'd be doing that now, it would be kind of a bigger thing. But I think a lot of people were like, what is happening? I have to do what? I have to pull out an app. Like it was kind of, I feel like some people especially a gallery setting were almost super into it, or people were like, I don't know what you're doing here. You should just be traditional. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's also like that idea of finding, I think with any artist, you have to find your people, you find the crowd, the people who like appeal to what you do. But the weirder, to use your terms, I'm going to say, I find it interesting and weird. But the weirder you do things, the harder it is to find that overlap or where people really like understand it or get it. But then there's also that technology aspect, which is really difficult to overcome.
Yeah, I still won't really want to pursue that. I feel like it was really labor intensive and and it was a slow way to paint. I really like to paint quickly. I like to paint kind of like impulse based, kind of the opposite of my design. I like to, just kind of have fun and free form while I'm painting. But to do a time lapse like that, you really have to do like one brush stroke and then stop, and that is harder to do, but I'd like to get back to it.
Well, and then the finished product too looks so seamless in the sense that, you lose the sense of real time because you're manipulating time. So it just had a really interesting approach to showing painting, which generally you don't see behind the scenes, or live painting is such a popular thing too. But to take that and digitize it and manipulate it in that way, I think was just really interesting and a nice.
I loved it when
layer.
I would show paintings like that, and someone would come up and be like, "Oh, I love this piece. Like, how did you do that?" I'd be like, "Oh, let me show you." Like, I was so excited to unveil that.
Yeah, it's like a little studio tour almost.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
And for me, it's actually nice to look back on too, because sometimes I'm like, how did I make that background? Oh, let me watch the video. Yeah.
Yeah, when you're in the moment, you don't always like take stock. Or I can relate to that as an artist who doesn't take meticulous notes while I'm making. Like, I mixed 3 drops of this color and 3 drops. No, it just happens.
Yeah. And then you're like, man, I really liked that.
Yeah.
How did I do it?
Yeah, you can't catch that lightning in a bottle again, right? Well, thinking about like what's next for you, right? So I know you talked about bringing more of that original art, hand painted kind of feel into the work. Do you have any big plans for either your personal practice, your design practice, or the combination of the two? Any big projects that you're dreaming about that, if you had unlimited resources, unlimited time that you'd get to?
I'd love to ask you that question too. Well, my design company is celebrating 10 years in July. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think we're going to, use the 10-year to kind of retell our story and kind of reposition ourselves to the community a little bit. I'm looking forward to that. A few months ago, around January, I actually started like another side quest of maybe playing with textile design.
Okay.
Where I launched a little baby company doing like my artistic patterns on different like textiles and clothing. And I kind of want to play with that and see where that goes. If I had unlimited resources and could do a project, is that what you're asking?
That's part of it. Yeah.
I really want to do some big murals. I've done some murals, but I think I never really identified with like a smaller gallery scene. I really like the idea of being out in public and being able to place a piece of artwork in somewhere that's public and unexpected. I just really want to pursue like some big, weird spaces. One day too, I really think I could bring back the augmented reality aspect to murals. I think that would be really interesting to be on the side of a building and pull out a phone and wonder how that was painted and see an entire time lapse across an entire huge building side.
That would be really cool. So if anyone's listening and has any opportunities to get big and weird with their mural locations or approaches, you know what to call. So when you see other artists, other earlier career, younger artists, right? What do you think they could learn from your approach? Whether it's the combination of fine art and design, whether it's the kind of joyfulness or playfulness or energy that you bring, like you as an individual, like where could you give some of that advice, or what do you see could be shared?
I think something that really helped me pursue being able to be a working creative is having like a really good community around me. And I know a lot of people hate it, but like networking and being out in the community, just talking about your work, talking about what you want to do. I graduated in 2019 with the recession. It was like 5% of people were getting a job or something in their field. And I got a job 2 weeks after graduation. And that was Erica Conway. Shout out Erica Conway. And I think just kind of like even being out there as like a young creative, I was just still in college. I was like showing up to creative events. I was showing up to art galleries. I was just getting myself out there and talking more to the creative community so that when I needed a job and I needed something, I could ask my community. And it works with feedback as well. I think when I'm working on something, and especially like the art community, I know you had John Kowalczyk here before. I feel like when I see him or Jeff Redmond, some of the people that I grew up with in the art world in Milwaukee, if I'm out somewhere, I could be like, oh, I'm working on this piece. I want to do X, Y, and Z. And, they'll just lend an ear and be able to talk me through it. So I think building like a support network around you is crucial. It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to be out here. But I think always learning, like always making sure you're trying to push yourself and learn and push your skills is important. It's not just like a set it and forget it type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it does get rusty sometimes. So you have to just kind of keep pushing your skills.
Well, and that's one of the reasons I really wanted to put together a discussion series like this because, everybody talks about small Milwaukee, right? But Milwaukee is also a very compartmentalized, siloed, segregated, and the art world in general can seem kind of exclusive. I mean, even that idea of like going to a gallery, right? Like, do I belong here? Will I know anybody? And I think artists like to push the cool factor a little bit. So it's like, oh, that person looks really cool. I don't know how I'm going to say something without sounding stupid. But events like this, right? Like, come on over. We have a live audience. I appreciate everybody that's here. Come to, not just art openings, but like you were saying, community gatherings, mural unveilings. There's so many opportunities to connect with creatives. And also when you're young, people expect young people to like make not great decisions, but do it in a good way, like put yourself out there and show up to the party that you weren't invited to and ask dumb questions, type it in the chat if anyone at home is watching the stream. There's no wrong way to approach something if you're doing it with earnestness and genuine, desire to be part of something. I think it's accepting too.
And I think it has been shifting. I think since when I was in college and like really an up and coming artist, I do feel like it was a little bit of a harder scene for a super young creative. But I think organizations like you and Arts at Large and Walker Point Center for the Arts and even like Bar Gallery, I feel like I've seen so many young kids in Bar Gallery that are like, oh, I'm going to be in the next 30 by 30 show. And I'm like, wow, you're way ahead of even knowing the scene than I was at 22 years old. So I think the ecosystem of Milwaukee's art community has already done a lot of work since I was a creative, that I think that they're already trying to nurture those creatives of like, where do you exactly go after college if you're interested in a creative career? I think you guys are working on it.
Well, I appreciate that. It's something we're trying to too. And even that idea of pursuing art school, right? Like, that can be a barrier or a degree at any college. So, we really try to connect with people regardless of like the on paper experience and give opportunities to people to make things, whether it's as, an employee with us or coming out to events and volunteering with things too. So not trying to pitch what we do. I guess this sounds like a little bit of a pitch.
You should.
Yeah, that's true too. So thinking of transitioning to the idea of youth and family and kind of making sure younger generations are cared for. You have a family yourself. You have more family on the way. We were talking about you providing access for your young people to your kids to make art and be creative. Why is that important to you?
I think that it's sad. We were talking about this for a second. I think we also, when we worked at the art museum, you could see there were so many kids that had never even been to a museum or never, if they visited the Kohl's studio, they had never, got to use certain materials. There's at some point, everybody is creative as a kid. And if you get crayons and markers, you're having the best time of your life. But now that I'm seeing, my oldest is 5.5. He reminds me every day he's 5.5. He's not 5. That just made me laugh. He'll be 6 in September. And I'm learning as a parent that his skills it is harder to keep up, like as trying to raise a young creative. Like he's growing out of just markers and crayons and he wants other materials. So as a parent, it's not that hard, but I do think we talked about like maybe I'm going to lose a chair in the process to a creative collage that afternoon. So I really do have to kind of like fuel his creativity. And I think at some point there probably is a lot of parents that are just like, well, I don't want you to like really ruin my stuff or, just, play with your markers and crayons. And at some point, I feel like a lot of kids kind of lose the access.
Mhm.
And I do feel like, and I've taught here and there. I've been invited to come into different schools and help different artists. I also taught at Splash Studio for 3 years. I taught mainly adults, but during that time, I also was like visiting schools sometimes. And I remember I think I came into a school of like sixth graders, and some of them were still kind of blown away at like mixing colors, and then I could do things, and I was like, man, where did you lose that? So I feel like for sure I'm trying to bring that into my home, that my kids think it's like completely normal to have like a full supplied art station that's like all IKEA'd out with like all these materials. And I'm trying to find different things that they explore. My oldest, he doesn't like drawing and painting as much as he almost likes like 3D,
Mhm.
which is really interesting to me. So we try to keep like paint and cardboard and scissors and things that he can almost make like sculptures. And I'm seeing how much confidence that gives him and how excited and proud he feels when he makes something that I know whether he's going to be a creative person or not. I'm just really excited to build an individual that is proud of who he is, that likes to show off his ideas. And I think it's just at this time and his age, I think that's just so important to build in his brain.
Yeah, and that's a really powerful point. So many people think that art making is just about the product, but the ancillary effects of confidence building in a low stakes environment, the idea that, I mean, think of how many kids get told don't play with scissors, don't, but that's
And I'm
kind of
like,
what art's
just
about,
how to play with them, right? Like,
yeah, do it safely and you can make something happen and turn nothing into something. It's
well,
so
and
empowering.
it's problem solving,
Mhm.
especially with like the 3D stuff that he's playing with. Like, I feel like I definitely want to jump in, but I'm like, he's like, it's falling down, it's breaking. Like, what do I do? And I was like, well, I think you need to put something that can hold up the center. Like, and I can see him like thinking it out. And I'm just like, I really feel like his brain is like literally alive and excited and challenged. It's just exciting to watch.
Love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's why we do what we do in education, too, is to spread that out to everybody. So
Yeah.
So I need to consult my notes here because that was just really moving to me. And I was also then wondering, speaking about brain development, this is a good segue. There's this, maybe it's a fallacy, maybe it's not, but the idea that, some things live on the right side of your brain and on the left side. Oftentimes, I think I see that broken down when it comes to like fine art and design. That's within an art context, a creative context. But then you throw in the entrepreneurship and the business side of things, and
What
you're
am I
adding,
doing?
you're adding a whole like math. What? Do you, from your personal experience, feel like you really have to activate those different sides of you to be a successful business person? Do you feel like an artist can develop those skills naturally, or was it a struggle for you? And how did you bring yourself to be able to do all those things and wear all those hats simultaneously,
I will get back to you
family?
on that. I'm not sure. I think that's such an interesting question. I think I've definitely tried to harness that to market myself, because there are a lot of creatives that maybe I don't want to stereotype artists, but I feel like there's a lot of artists that maybe have like not so good communication skills, or they like to be really introverted and not really talk. And I feel like something that really works well for us is, always kind of talking through my process or telling my clients where I'm at, and always having that line of communication. And we've been told like we haven't met that many creatives that are like on top of the process or the communication as much as you guys. And I don't know how we're pulling it off. I think my business partner is a former teacher. And I just have always been super talkative. So I think I am an extroverted creative. The entrepreneurship, I think in a weird way, I feel like that came from knowing I wanted to be a mom, if that makes any sense. I feel like I really was having like the best time of my life when I worked at the museum. At that same time, when I worked at the museum, I was also working at Splash Studio. So I'd go from the museum to teaching at night, and I was having like the best time. But something I knew in my mind's eye, if I wanted to have a family, I wanted to be as flexible as possible. So I kind of felt like that if I started my own business, that would be the way to do that. So I started my own business in 2015, and we kind of built that up. And in 2019, I had my first kid, and I could not be more happy about the life that I've created, that I am able to financially support myself, but I can make my own decisions. I don't have to call out to work or get a PTO day when my kid is sick. It's just so nice. And I'm excited when they start getting older to realize that, mommy's a business owner. I think that'll be inspiring and exciting to them too.
You were sharing, okay, thank you for explaining that too, because when you said that the entrepreneur side of things was fueled by your desire to be a parent,
I think so.
I wasn't connecting it, but that makes so much sense.
I think so. I didn't really think I was going to be able to pull it off. I think I thought I was going to maybe just get a job, but I was in my early mid 20s. I think I was like 26 when we started Oddbon. And I was like, if I'm going to try it, I'm going to try it right now. I'm not going to try it when I have 3 kids. No, thanks. Yeah, I really think that's where it came from.
When I feel like so many people think they have to make a decision between, being a good blank, fill in the blank with whatever it is, you have to focus on one thing. And I feel like we get told that by a lot of mentors or teachers sometimes that, you really need to dig into one area. But what I hear you saying though, is that they can inspire and influence and fuel one another, right? Like you can be a great parent and let that fuel your desire to start your own business, or vice versa, maybe.
But I think a lot of creatives probably do have a hard time just picking one medium, don't you think? I feel like if you really ask a lot of artists, they're like, well, I'm working on this collage and I'm working on this sculpture and I'm working on this drawing. Like a lot of artists probably do have a hard time picking one lane in general. I just happen to pick a couple things that are untraditional to a fine artist.
Sure. Well, and you've shared your story, your journey through creative careers and the business side of things. What non-art related experiences, whether it's employment or hobbies or just experiences in life, do you think was most helpful for you in your career, in your creative arts and life?
Non-art experiences in my career.
Yeah, that fueled the career, that like informed it.
I feel like it's kind of like networking and being out there. I feel like I really wish it wasn't that. I wish that you could just get a lot of opportunities just on like merit and skill alone. But I think just being out in the community, being talkative, probably making it some sort of impression somewhere. I feel like it's led to a lot of my favorite fine art or design opportunities. So I think that could be part of it. And I think now as I'm getting older, I think it's just kind of about embracing your own personality and kind of just like putting your own self out there more and kind of like figuring out your true self and just letting that shine, not trying to put yourself in another cookie cutter box of this person's like trending and this is doing really well. I'm going to do that. Don't do that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's really good advice for especially young people trying to navigate social circles and social life in general. Teenage years are really tough, trying to find your place. Having said that too, did you ever have a phase? Was there a point where you didn't know your true self and where you were maybe really like emo or something like that? Like
I had an emo phase. I did have a country phase that I do not identify with now. My family is still really into country. So if they're listening, that's fine. There are pictures of me in a cowboy hat and like cowboy boots at some point in my life. I did change a lot. I also had dreadlocks at some point in my life. That's not good. I was finding myself a lot. I don't think I was ever like upset with myself or that. What word did you use that you were like, if I was really like sad that I went through that time? I think it's all a learning experience. You can't get to where you're going without everything that you've been through.
So, Dena, having said that, you won't be sad that we found some pictures of
Oh my
you.
God.
No, I'm saying we don't have that level of production. I'm not
I
at
think I
that
made
point.
sure
My
those are off of
journalistic
Facebook.
perfect. That's good. Don't go digging anybody. Well, thank you for going down that fun path. So I'm thinking about in your design work, your most challenging aspect of that. So, thinking of whether it's, I want to say the business side of it, whether that was the most challenging or an aspect of that, whether it's the work itself. Like, if you had to prepare somebody for entering into a world of, owning your own design business, what do you think? What are some of those roadblocks that you think they might encounter? What have you encountered? What did you learn and grow from? How can you help prevent the next generation from experiencing the same kind
Oh my
of
God.
difficulty?
We could have a whole talk about that. It is incredibly tough. I think everybody goes into, there's so many young designers and creatives that I have met that are like, I'm awesome. I've got 1,000 followers on Instagram. I'm going to start my own business. And I'm like, okay, guess how much, they're like, I'm going to start my own design business. I'm like, how much design do you think I get to do a day versus how much do I run the business? They're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, it's a lot. Like, to run the business is a lot. And a lot of us that go into entrepreneurship didn't go to school for business. So you're learning everything as you go. And yeah, we screwed up a lot in the beginning and maybe didn't do our taxes right or didn't do sales tax right or something. That's a lot. I feel like I still get to be creative a lot in the day. But it is a learning curve with trying to balance both. And still why we grow. We're only a team of 3, but I think we're growing. I keep that in my mind of like, I built this to be creative still. I don't want to build this into a business that I am just running the business. So that's tough too. That's something to always keep in mind. In terms of like the design process, like what's harder or what is something you want to tell like a younger creative? I feel like learning and vetting like a good design process. I've heard a lot of people that just say like maybe just like go to a different agencies and try to see if they'll let you shadow so you can see how different people kind of do their process. I think kind of figuring out like your groove on how you get to a final product is also really important. You can't just like come up with a logo out of nowhere. Like there really should be a good process that you take yourself through. It's maybe like mental in the beginning, and then it's research based, and then it's back to the drawing board where you're doing physical things. Like you need to kind of figure out what works for you to get you to what you think is kind of like an excellent product. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. I feel like that's a good reality check. I think if I rephrased that question in a more eloquent way, I would have said, what's a good reality check when it comes to that work? What about your fine art? So where have you, considering that your fine art to you is so much your own, do you find any points of tension or conflict or roadblocks with that? Or is that something that you've managed to keep very pure and very much, in your own expressive voice?
I think that's where kind of like this whole conversation we've been talking about, like it's almost like I have like a split personality. I think because of the design work has become so methodical that it's all so intention based that when it comes to my fine art, especially for the last 10 years, it is completely like selfish. It is impulse based. It is surprise based. It is like a therapy for me. When I was younger, maybe I cared. I feel like now I'm like, I don't care if you like it. It is something that made me feel really good to make. I do find there's certain people that like it, but I feel like for me, it is really about mark making, being in the studio, giving myself that time to let loose without the rigidness of design. And I feel like it's almost like I'm having a call and response now physically, even in the same space. And it's great. I think it's good for me to have that. I think as a designer, maybe I would be too rigid if I didn't have something that I'm really allowing myself to just explore and see what happens. I think it keeps me fresh.
Do you think if you were an accountant, you would still make art. Or if you like, I know you say you don't want to give up that creative side of the business, but if you can imagine yourself just handling the business and the finances and things, like, would you still be impulsive with your art?
I would probably be doing more art because I'd be like, I'm just in a 9 to 5. I'm going to cut out at 4 and go make art. If I had a more traditional job, I'd probably be making more art because I wouldn't be running the business.
I want to see that. I really love the idea that somebody gives themselves agency and authority to be impulsive. You know, that's something that I feel like with young people, or even within, like you're saying, a professional context, you don't want to be impulsive. You want to be measured. You want to think things through and rational. So it's really refreshing to hear you say, like, I think it
depends. I feel like I've met some really amazing artists, both young and like very successful artists, that when you ask them about their process, they would say a similar process, that it's almost like we're looking into their soul. And it's like, this is my soul. This is how I make something. This is the art that I make.
Be impulsive. I'm thinking of all the teachers that might be listening, being like, no.
I know. And I definitely, I had a lot of teachers in college that were like, no. You need to, this is how you do it. And this is why you have to have a why. I feel like somebody in Milwaukee that's doing that like super well is, I feel like Dan Fleming. Do you know Dan Fleming? He's one of the people I worked with at Splash. I feel like we came up together, and I feel like I do abstract. Dan always did a lot of abstract, but Dan has like honed his abstraction where Dan, if you're listening, if you ever see this, I don't even know if you remember this, but at some point he was like, people were like asking him what your work is about. What is your work is about? And he was always like making something up because it was abstract and he didn't feel like that was the true subject matter. But now he's gotten really like figurative based and subject based. And I'm like, that is still Dan, but there's a big story behind the works that he does. And I think he pulled it off really well, that he went towards that of what an art teacher would love to eat of that story, but it's still him for sure.
And do you tell your kids it's okay to be impulsive?
Yes. I mean, yeah, they have their own little sections in my studio, and it wasn't long ago. We were all in there at like 9 a.m. I was painting, they were painting, and they're like, what should I make? I'm like, do whatever. Like, let's just feel it. Definitely don't say that to like a 2-year-old, because then they'll just like paint all over themselves. Like, I'm feeling it. But I think it's good. Again, if you think about like later in life, how many opportunities do you have that somebody tells you to do that? Mm-hmm. Just do what makes you feel good. Like it's sad. You don't get that many opportunities anymore.
Yeah. And it's better to seek that through art than other avenues too. I'm curious who your inspirations are. And this can be, people within the local art community. This can be, the art history textbooks, but, as a person who does both sides of things, fine art and design and other parts of the creative process, do you have any people that you modeled your creativity off of, or your path through creativity in terms of design and business, or just anyone that inspires you that maybe is unexpected?
I'm thinking of 3 female creatives. 2 of them are painters. One of them is an artist named Heather Day. She's probably my age or a little bit younger. She's a really bold abstract painter. And again, I kind of started seeing her career probably 10 or 15 years ago. And she just had a small studio in San Francisco. She actually did a semester at my ed. She's kind of taught herself different areas all over the country. And then she ended up with a studio in San Francisco. It was like small. She was doing small shows in California. And her career has blown up in the last 10 or 15 years. I feel like I tried to go see, I was just in San Francisco and I was like, oh, I wonder if I could see her work. Nope. She was in Berlin with a new big show in Germany. And it's very exciting and inspiring to see a young female abstract artist like really represented. I think she's done some museum shows, as we probably know from MAM. It's really hard to get into a museum as a contemporary artist. She's just really exciting to watch, to see that there's still people that are like looking for young female abstract artists. So I really like her work. Yelena James is another really awesome, successful, beautiful painter, mainly abstract. Both of them kind of show me like there is a spot for female young abstract artists. In terms of the design side, Jessica Hish is an awesome designer. I do not understand how she does what she does. She's super famous. She's got crazy big clients on her client list. But she's just like her own shop. It's like her freelancing away, and she's had 3 kids while her career is blown up. I don't know how she's done that. But it's also, I think it's more the people that are most inspiring are people that I want to be, I want to be there, like my superheroes. Like I see it in the world. I'd like to try to recreate their success.
Well, I hope you can be a superhero for anyone watching this. And I really think Milwaukee does a lot of good work. The people here are really committed to what they do. And hopefully, these things can be shared. These things can be inspiration. And it's a lot easier, I think, to follow the path of somebody who is near you, like proximity, age-wise, all those things. So hopefully, I'd like to see you name dropped at someone's next
I'm always
talk.
down to talk to younger creatives. I feel like I'm always down to share my time like this one-on-one with anybody who, especially like young girls that want to be painters or designers, like come talk to me.
Excellent. And that's actually what inspired me to give you a call about this was at our teen exhibition, you were giving some advice to somebody who is normally in the audience. On one of their family members was having some troubles with their design.
Yes, I remember that. Like talking through their piece, and it was great. Yeah, I'm always happy to do that because again, I think that is the reason that I've gotten to where I am is other people putting out their arm and lending a hand to me to get me to where I am. I would only be right if I did that to the younger generation.
Well, thank you for that. I completely lost track of time, but we are getting close to wrapping up. And I'd like to give some time for questions that anyone may have either virtually or in the audience. But I also really like to make sure that y'all have time to share anything you want. So are there any questions you wish I had asked? Are there any things that you wanted to bring to the table? I know we didn't get to the list completely, but if you just want to take the mic and make this your soapbox.
Oh, wow. If anybody's looking for a mural, please holler. Also, keep an eye out for Advent Creative. We're celebrating 10 years this year. We work mainly with nonprofits. I didn't really say that, but our main focus is community organizations. So if there's any community organizations that, especially anybody like women's rights or children's education, like those are big topics to us that we would love to help you with. Just in terms of something that we've talked about is I really do. If I had a soapbox, I would say like really let your kids be creative as long as you can. Please fuel the things they're interested in. And if they need some cardboard and extra tape, like make sure to give it to them. Like I really would love to see kids all the way till 18 feel like they could be creative no matter what. And it'd be a way more welcomed experience in a family setting.
That's great. I also try to keep that in mind with my young person at home. And it's tough. It's not easy to make that time and space for people to do that.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's inspiring to hear you talking about making that space within your own art making space for that. So thank you for the generosity.
Yeah.
Did we have anyone who had any questions or would like to know a little bit more? Anyone on our live stream that would like to type anything in, feel free. We've got some time. While we wait for some of those to come up or for any questions, I'd like to elevate our new backdrop. This is by another artist who's worked with AWE, Christina Rolander, and I think it just complements your work, Dena, really well and adds a little bit of sparkle to the space too.
I love it.
Expanding out that creative network as well. Any thoughts, questions for Dena before we wrap up?
Don't be shy.
I do have a question on the current piece on display. What were your thoughts and what was your first brushstroke?
Oh,
that's a good question.
Thank you, Willie. This piece was one of, I think, 5 pieces I did. I called it the Rainbow and Ripples series. I really like the fluidity of paint, and I like to kind of like showcase that on a canvas. So I feel like there are the background is like super, super watery. And then even this part right here is very texturized. So the first part that I did where I actually laid out all 5 canvases, I made a whole color. That's kind of like my design brain coming in. I made the whole color palette that I knew I wanted. I mixed that up. I laid all the canvases out and I made this watery background. And each canvas, I got to have so much fun with, like getting all the fluidity of the paint in the background. And then and that's what a proper art teacher would love, the lean to fat ratio of going from thin to thick. And then I would build up the thickness of the paint until this was my last stroke of like the thickest brush stroke. I really like the sculptural feel that does. And yeah, I really feel like I just wanted to paint something that felt like some watery rainbows were meeting together. That was it.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
The X of the microphone.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
Shadow.
Oh.
See what it looks like
Oh,
Yeah, way better. Oh.
without the shadow.
sorry, I can see it.
Awesome.
I have a question. What's the best way to reach out to you? Like, if for someone that has questions regarding, art, or even to get in contact with you for a mural, like, what's the best way to?
Thank you.
to reach out?
Dena Nord at Instagram, just at Dena Nord, one word, is my art feed. You can easily find me there. Advant, you can find us on Instagram at ODVANT. I was going to say slide into our DMs, but that seems, just contact us there. Yeah.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for sharing your time with us.
It's
and the
inappropriate.
laughs. And I just wanted to invite everybody out. I'm really bad with dates, so I'm going to consult my notes, but Friday, May 30th, we are hosting 43rd and Valete events that we do here with our partners, Denizen and Event Space, Jazzy Rays, Washington Park Media Center, and Artists Working Education. So we want that to be another opportunity for people to connect, to network, to share in some joy and creativity. It's open to the public. It's free. So come on down if you want to hang out, learn more about what we do, but just, are looking for something to do. We will also be having our next Painted Forward session on June 9th with Phoenix Brown. So feel free to join us here at the Media Center in person or virtually on the YouTube. Like and subscribe, Washington Park Media Center, AWE, all that stuff. Slide into our DMs if you want. We have email too. We're here for you. So thank you for sharing time, everybody, and we'll continue the conversation off camera.
Thanks, Brett. Thanks, guys. Oh my goodness.